Gosia, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks very much for having me.
This is a very first for us. So it's we thought we'd do something a little bit different. You know, on Port to Port, we focus a lot on our stories and on telling what is behind the labels and presenting the people that are behind it. And up until today, we've done it through newsletters and our editorial section on the site. However, you know, this wonderful medium called Instagram and YouTube and Netflix, obviously, we're going to simulcast on Netflix as well. Of course, we do. We thought we do change the format a little bit and we add a little bit of spice to our wine stories. And this is our very first. This morning, 9 a.m., our Delheim newsletter written by yourself went out. And I think we just wanted to know a little bit of background about it. But before that, I'm going to introduce you. You are collaborating with Port to Port now for a while through your brand Glou Glou, which started as a passion project, I believe, with Kristen. And recently also started your own marketing company called Gosh.
Yeah, just over a year ago.
So everything wine. So welcome very much to our show. And let's get started. I think we're going to start with the Chardonnay Sur Lie. You from Delheim, which is this Stellenbosch farm, a champion of Stellenbosch wine, very much historic winery with a strong German DNA. You visited last week?
Yeah, so I was there last week to write the article about Delheim, and I specifically wanted to look into their eco-warrior angle because they're really well known for that. So I think to anyone that's ever been to Delheim, the first thing they'll see is it's incredibly bushy and leafy, and there's just so much wildlife, abundant fynbos everywhere. One of the first things you'll also notice is it's got that very homey vibe. So when I went to meet with Rolf and Danica, so the winemaker and marketing manager, I met them in their restaurant. And what you'll find is that as you enter the restaurant, it's literally on the stoep of Nora Sperling's home. So Nora and Victor, they are currently the owners. So their mom and dad started didn't start Delheim, but they've been running. It's a family
business for generations.
100%, exactly.
That's amazing.
And so it's something extra special to sit on the stoep of Nora's home. She actually walks around with the Jack Russells. There's a legend that goes that if the Jack Russells pick your table, she'll come and say hello to you. So they're kind of like the filters. And what I particularly love about the farm is that it really has that unpretentious feeling. You know, even though they've got wines of great prestige, it's not exclusive to anyone. It's a very welcoming space, and they make excellent wines, which we're going to try today.
Amazing.
So
yes, and we're actually starting with a Chardonnay. I mean, I know that corner of Stellenbosch on the slopes of the Siemensberg, I believe, some of the best Cabernet Sauvignon in the world. However, we start today with the Chardonnay Sur Lie, which I believe means on the lees.
Yeah, 100%.
And before we go into the vegan aspect of things, because that's something that quite interested me from your newsletter. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about this wine in the way of what does this lees
actually mean and what it
actually mean for our viewers.
My experience, so I studied wine in Burgundy. That was sort of my first foray into the wine world, and Chardonnay obviously is very well known from Burgundy, and the way it's made that makes it different from other white wines is they put it through a process that's got a very complicated name called malolactic fermentation, but basically that just means that you're turning the malic acid into lactic acid, and lactic acid has that buttery, almost vanilla notes, and the lees is what forms on the bottom of the barrels. They'll actually go in and mix it sometimes with a process called batonnage, but basically Sur Lies just means that wine has been left sitting on the lees, and it absorbs that flavor, that delicious butteriness, that vanilla.
So it gives you also a mouthfeel.
And the mouthfeel, like a fuller, rounded mouthfeel. Exactly. It's my favorite characteristic, I think.
In this particular wine, which I find amazing, it's not overwhelming. It still has its citrus, it has a fresh acidity, and it's not like heavy. It's actually an amazing wine. How much does this retail, I believe?
190 rand.
190 rand. That's
I think, for the quality of wine you're getting, especially in South Africa, to find like a high quality Chardonnay, because a lot of people make it, but to have this Burgundy style classic is really beautiful. And for 190, it's not bad. Hey, dog.
Hey, talking about Jack Russell's.
Yeah, so he's clearly has a good filter system.
There you
go. So there you go. You can join.
So I've actually also give you a little bit of snacks.
Thank you very much, just to cleanse the palate. A classic biltong.
And we're drinking out of Gabriel glass, so I just want to spend 10 seconds on this, because this is an amazing universal glass, which a wine cellar brings in, one of our marketplace partners, brings into the country.
And you can feel the quality just by touching it.
It's a phenomenal hand-blown
delicate
glass, and you can drink anything from champagne to big bold red wines in this glass. It's an absolute.
So it's multifunctional, but also it's very delicate. So I'd be very cautious. It drinks very special wine out of it.
Absolutely. And so I want to touch on a very interesting topic, vegan. So vegan, obviously, I mean, I've tried to be vegan for I think whole 3.5 days in my life, and after eating nuts and mushroom burgers, I really went nuts very quickly. But I think many people probably don't associate necessarily vegan with wine, and why is a wine not non-vegan to start with? So maybe you can explain that.
Well, exactly. I think there's two misperceptions that even I went in. Even as someone in the wine industry, you kind of think, okay, isn't all wine vegan? Where does the meat come in? Which kind of scares people a little bit. And also, do they make vegan wines differently? And by speaking to Roelof and Danica at Delheim, they kind of enlightened me to the process. So first of all, what makes a vegan wine vegan is basically comes down to the very last process, one of the final processes in the winemaking stage, which is fining. And that just means that you're wanting to clarify the wine so that it goes, if it's got any kind of particles floating in it, that's perfectly natural. You just want to fine it so people want a beautiful, clear glass of wine. Right. And to fine wine, normally you use animal-derived derivative like casein, egg whites, and isinglass, which is a fish derivative. So yes, it's not like a huge portion of meat per se. It's not the classical sense of what you think, but that said, there is an animal byproduct. So if you're very strict vegan, exactly radical, I like to see strict, but sure. Then obviously, then you want to be aware of that. And I think first of all, there's been poor communication from maybe the wine industry side, because people don't realize that. But then obviously the other misperception is that, if there are alternatives, then does that make the wine worse quality because we've been doing it this way? Right. And Roelof makes the argument that not at all. His decision to make vegan wine is not a react to market demand at all. He's wanting to make vegan wine. No, she's not vegan. But she's clearly also picked her favorite. Fine. But yeah, so his decision to make vegan wine is to up the quality. Okay. So he's using bentonite, which is a clay derivative, so it's plant-based or naturally based. And really what's interesting about the fact that they've gone vegan is that they've just chosen to communicate it. A lot of wines are vegan,
do it and don't say
but they just don't communicate it, and I think it's more and more apt and relevant to talk about.
I believe this. Also most vegans probably do not know that they're drinking animal derivatives in the wine.
So it is our duty as the wine industry, I think, to
exactly.
Exactly.
No, I understand, and I think it's a whole movement to be transparent about what goes in the vineyard, what goes in the wine, and I think consumers in general want to know more about it. So because this is the beauty of a live show, and we have no spittoons.
Oh yes.
So we want to move over to the next wine, and before you maybe tell me a bit more about the winemaker, which I'm actually quite interested in, because you met him and about the farm and we are on a Chardonnay now, but I believe they focus on Cab as well,
and Pinotage
and Pinotage.
Yeah. So I met Roelof obviously for the first time. He's actually only been at Delheim for a year. Yeah. So his experience previously, he's worked at chateaus in France, and he's worked at Guardian Peak and a few other wineries locally. If you can just
pour this out, we need to put the red in.
I can drink it. It's so good I would drink it all, but I know there's a few more wines to try.
Yes, we have to survive the live show.
Yeah. But essentially, Roelof, he's a great guy and very passionate about history and about family. And I think I asked him, what drew you to work at Delheim? And he said, thank you very much. There is an opportunity to work with such a historic brand. Yeah. He would jump at the chance, and he's really intrigued by the fact that they've got such great vineyards. So they've got a lot of, some of the wine we're going to be trying 32-year-old vineyards that they've got access to, but he's also got a little bit of freedom to play, and one of the new additions that he's bringing in the last year is that there could be potentially all vegan friendly wines in this year's range. So he says he's, as I mentioned, it's not a market demand. It's not a result to a market demand. So he's using the word potentially, because should the wine require a different fining agent, he will use it. That's why it's quite important to note. And that kind of blew my mind, because honestly, I thought everything's a market demand these days, that they're just going vegan, that they've had to change their processes. Not at all. It's just about bettering the quality. You know?
They believe in what they're doing.
100%.
And on that note, we are actually going to move over to their flagship wine, which I believe is their icon wine. It's their Grand Reserve.
Yeah.
And we're also very lucky because we're opening a 2015 vintage, which I believe, I mean, it's arguably the best vintage we had in the last 50 years in South Africa.
Yeah.
I mean, what is a perfect vintage for who doesn't know? Because there is obviously, I mean, vintage variation is not so strong in South Africa as in Europe, for example. But I think there are certain conditions that are met. So from a certain amount of rainfall, a certain temperature, not too hot, no rainfall during harvest, and all those things. And 2015 was just amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
And in Stellenbosch, for red wines, I believe we got our first 100-pointer wine that year. So for collectors and buyers out there, I think it's really something to keep aside. It's a year that will go down in the history books. Correct.
Yeah, I mean, you asked what makes a perfect vintage, and I think at the end of the day, there's that elusive word, terroir, that everyone speaks of, and there's all those elements. You know, it's the impact of the human hand, but also the sun, the climate, the aspects. And then, I mean, if the weather was played along well and we had a good year, then that's wonderful. I really saw that, like you mentioned, the difference is more in Burgundy or abroad, where it's much more stark. But I think in South Africa we have that blessing of having generally... we have good wine and we have great wine. Yeah.
So Grand Reserve is 84% Cab Sauvignon, which is interesting because I think the legal minimum to say that it's 100% Cab is 85%. This is something I always found very interesting. But however, this is 84%, so obviously the rest is Merlot and Cab Franc. So it's a Bordeaux blend, which is highly dominant on Cab Sauvignon, which is so amazing in that area.
Yeah.
And this wine, I believe, Delheim got how many points?
94 points.
94 points, which is amazing on Timac. What is the retail price?
340.
340, which is still, I mean, I find extremely competitive on a wine like this.
Yeah.
It can age probably 15, 20 years easily in the cellar.
So this is, I think, definitely the talking point. Roelof, the winemaker, was very adamant on making sure that even as a new winemaker, he wants to maintain the style and consistency, and he wants people to associate Delheim with the Grand Reserve. And I think one of the characteristics, especially on the nose, for me, is just that herbaceousness, that leafiness that comes through. And as I mentioned, like when you go through to Delheim, you really understand why. Because there's the tasting room, but then there's just trees and plants everywhere. And that level kind of seeps in, you know, to their wine. And it's something to be proud of. And it's kind of why they have that title of being eco-warrior or eco-champion, you know. They really care about the environment they surround themselves in. So...
No, phenomenal wine.
Yeah.
I must say. So tell me about Delheim. There is a little anecdote on the first owner.
Yeah, well,
there's a funny nickname.
Spatz Sperling.
Spatz is the little bird.
Yes, and then it's called Spatzendrek, which is one of his very well-known dessert wines, and the label of that wine actually won the worst label.
The worst.
Worst wine label.
Which is our next wine.
No, that's not that.
That's not that. That's the Edelspatz.
Yes.
Sorry, apologize. Which is the cousin of the Spatz Sperling.
Yes.
And he came from Germany.
Yeah, so he was originally from Germany. He was actually working on his uncle's farm, Hoheisen, with his aunt Deli. So it was called Delheim.
And that's why it's called Deli's home, Delheim.
So it's really a family story. It's actually beautiful.
But also Spatz Sperling as a person and as a person in the wine industry is very, very well known because he was one of the 3 angry men who started the Stellenbosch wine route as well as the Niederberg wine auction. So actually very, very well known within.
Okay, it's really a pillar of the South African wine industry. This is amazing. Can I borrow your glass because I don't want to pour out the red, because it's really too delicious. But I want to try with Gosia this sweet wine, Noble Late Harvest, which means that the grapes, correct me if I'm wrong, hang longer on the actual vine.
Yeah.
Until
almost
basically
like raisin.
They go raisiny, so they dehydrate in a way and lose their water parts.
Yeah.
Their acidity stays and their sugar level rise. And in this case, it's Riesling.
Yeah, which is one of the few, right?
Very few, I think. Yes, I mean, other notable Rieslings that I know that are made in Oberlet Harvest are the Paul Kluwer, which always also wins amazing awards. But this is phenomenal, and I think, I mean, there is a little bit of a comeback in appreciation on sweet wines.
Yeah.
Because it's always been a category that always a little bit under the radar.
Yeah, it's kind of grandma's closet, you know, after dinner.
Years,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but let's not forget that that's what made our reputation as a sort of as winelands.
It was put us on the map,
sweet wines,
ultimately,
and put us on the map. Correct. So there's definitely some credit that needs to be given to it.
What do you think? I mean,
phenomenal. It always blows my mind how you can keep on drinking this, because when you get this balance, the keyword is balance here, acidity and sugar. And when you get that balance so right, you just can keep on drinking.
It's like drinking honey, you know?
It is absolutely like drinking honey.
And I think that's actually what makes Riesling my personal, like, one of my favorite varieties is, like you say, that balance, because it carries through into the sweetness as well.
Absolutely. But then again, when we go back to a piece of biltong or a beautiful steak, I mean, you go with a Cabernet.
Yeah, it won't stand.
What is the price of this sweet wine?
This one is 285 rand.
285. So in general, very modestly priced.
Yeah, I mean, for a premium range, I think that they're very accessible, and that's also part of that whole theme that I mentioned is inclusivity.
Yeah.
Danica, again, marketing manager at Delheim, she told me the fact that they're trying to communicate they're vegan is not about excluding the majority, it's about including the minorities and just saying, you know what, we want everyone to have an experience of beautiful wine. And I think their price points reflect that. It is premium, but you have to take into consideration where South Africa is right now within the economy, what people understand. So even if our market doesn't quite, you know, have that much spending power, to have access to wines like this, it's so worth paying, because they're going to last you for years. I mean, you can cellar this and drink it at your child's 21st if you want.
No, 100%. Especially buy Magnum. If you need to cellar this for your child's 21st, always buy Magnum. I believe that 750 ml is too small to share.
Yeah.
So before we say goodbye to our numerous viewers, which are in different time zones, and there are people that woke up in the middle of the night to actually tune in. So I really appreciate that. Before we do that, I just, because you mentioned the Stellenbosch wine route and other initiatives, and I just want to mention that I believe you have a talk very soon.
I do. Thanks for bringing it up. So essentially, as you mentioned, I specialize in my company is Gosh Wine Marketing, and my background, you know, is online shops, building online stores and wine clubs. So I thought to myself, you know, I see the gap. The reason I started my business was I see that there's a need for people to learn how to take their wine online, essentially. And also leverage what they already have to sell more of it, because it is a tricky market out there. So on the 2nd of July at Jordan Wines, I'm doing a 3-hour masterclass.
Amazing.
Where I'm going to be taking people through very practical tips and recommendations of how to work and start online stores, what you need, how to set up wine clubs, or are wine clubs even relevant in this day and age?
Right.
And then also talking about content creation and the value thereof, as we're doing today. So,
that's amazing. Maybe we can do a live stream of the masterclass.
No pressure, but
I think it's very interesting. Gosia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much
today.
for having me, and for the delicious
It was really a great
wine.
pleasure, and for helping me as well to go through this first episode, which was
It's been
all
super.
of this is very improvised.
I think the wine makes it all the better to do.
Yeah, and the dog. It helps.
So yeah, thank you very much.
So just for our many viewers, next week we have our second episode, and it's very spicy. It's going to be on Friday, I believe, Delheim. Friday, I think, Friday 3 p.m. We're going to sit with a very renowned personality from the wine industry who will talk to us about Australian wines, and we're going to open Australian wines, and we are going to talk about one of the oldest, not if the oldest family, the oldest family of Australian winemaking. Thank you very much, and
tune in next week. Yeah.
See you next week.
Ciao.
Can I do the